If an ordinary woman walked into a room filled with diamonds and power, how would you look at her? Would you notice the worn-out flats she was wearing, the linen dress with no brand tag, the fact that she came alone, no stylist, no PR team, not even a last name anyone recognized? At a gala hosted by the most prestigious names in Paris, where invitations were more exclusive than royalty and appearances were everything, she looked like a mistake, a glitch in the design, an error quietly waiting to be escorted out, and so they did. But what no one knew was that the woman they laughed at was the reason they were standing there in the first place. And when the lights dimmed and the museum walls lit up with her name, Paris finally realized she hadn't come to be seen. She had come to let the truth be seen. On a crisp October evening, under the golden lights of the Musée d'Orsay, a woman stepped onto the red carpet, wearing nothing that glittered, but everything that meant something. No designer label, no entourage, no name whispered by publicists. Just a quiet presence, wrapped in linen and silence, walking straight into a world that had already decided she didn't belong. And yet, she was the story. Paris, a crisp October night. The Musée d'Orsay shimmered like a dream of culture and control. Red carpets, tuxedos from Rue Saint-Honoré, whispered deals wrapped in silk and Creed perfume. Then she arrived, a woman in a cream linen dress, creased from the train ride, fabric strap flats dulled by time, hair in a loose bun, not careless but chosen. Her name was Amélie Laurent. At that moment, no one in the room recognized it. The reception desk fell quiet. Behind her laughter, did one of the servers wander into the gala? A woman whispered, "No," another smirked. Maybe Waste Management sent a guest. Amélie stepped forward with an envelope. No logo, no gold leaf, just ivory cardstock. The receptionist didn't even open it. "Madame," he said, without looking at her face. Support staff enters from the back. Before she could speak, a woman in a black satin gown interrupted Clémence Dartois, head of PR at Artemis Auction House. "If you're looking for the kitchen, dear, it's not here, but I do admire your thrift store confidence." Laughter. Champagne clinks. Judgment disguised as politeness. Amélie nodded once. She said nothing and turned to walk away. No one bothered to read the name on the envelope in her hand. Had they done so, they might have seen the name of the woman funding the very exhibition they were about to celebrate. Amélie walked slowly out of the main hall, the golden lights casting her reflection onto the glass, a solitary figure in a wrinkled linen dress. No one turned to look. No one asked her name. Only laughter and cruel whispers trailed behind her. She probably works at some greeting card shop. Maybe she's an illegitimate cousin from the Marceau family. Embarrassing. If I were in charge, I would have called security the moment she stepped in. Amélie didn't respond. She moved toward the side staircase, leading to the auxiliary exhibition floor, away from the baccarat chandeliers and string quartet. Each step landed like a needle, threading through layers of false grandeur. In her hands was a file-thin, worn, unremarkable one, containing the exhibition notes she had written by hand, line by line, on countless sleepless nights. Downstairs beneath the glamour, she chose a wooden chair beside the sculpture, Le Coeur Nu, a heart cast from scrap steel pulled from the edges of Paris raw, unfinished, but unignorable. A young assistant passed by, about to ask if she needed help, until his eyes caught the red wax seal on her envelope, the insignia of Fondation Laurent. He paused, his mouth open to speak, but Amélie gently shook her head, offering a quiet smile. Not the kind worn as armor, the kind worn by someone who knows exactly where she is and why. She didn't need to raise her voice to be heard. She only needed the right moment. Upstairs, the gala was reaching its crescendo. Champagne flowed like liquid arrogance. Under the baccarat chandelier, Clémence d'Artois, draped in black satin, stood center stage. One hand raised her voice, dripping with self-congratulation. We stumbled upon a lost archive of women's voices, nameless, forgotten, and I spent 3 years restoring it as a tribute to them. Applause rippled, perfectly timed. No one questioned who had done the real work, but in the shadow of the museum's outer column, someone was watching. Outside the glass walls, Amélie sat silently, her manuscript resting in her lap. She had not come to beg for credit. She had come to bear witness. And then a taxi stopped. An older man stepped out, tall and graceful, in a charcoal coat, his silver-streaked hair catching the museum's glow. His eyes scanned the entrance. Then, locked on her cam, he froze. Amélie Laurent. She nodded. "My God," he breathed. "You're the one who built Mémoire Éternelle, aren't you?" Her gaze was steady. No one should build their name on someone else's silence. His face tightened. Recognition, regret, and something like reverence. From his coat, he pulled a card. Henri Delacour, Président du Comité d'Honneur, Orsay Gala. "You don't have to stand out to be unforgettable," he said gently. "Do you have a moment?" "I don't have an invitation," she replied, without flinching. He smiled. "I am the invitation." Henri had been a close friend of her late father, Jean Laurent, a painter who died penniless for refusing to compromise his vision. He hadn't seen Amélie since the funeral. "They think a dress defines your worth," Henri murmured. "But tonight, memory and truth will walk the runway." And as the grand iron gates opened for her, she didn't look back. She walked forward inside the grand ballroom. The night was reaching its peak. Crystal chandeliers cast golden halos over rows of designer gowns, polished shoes, and rehearsed smiles. The music from the string quartet wove through the room like a thread of superiority, elegant and cold. At the center of it all, Clémence d'Artois raised her champagne flute, standing beneath a massive LED screen. Her smile sparkled almost as much as her earrings. "And tonight," she declared, "we celebrate the rediscovery of voices, history nearly erased thanks to Mémoire Éternelle, which I was honored to curate." Applause erupted, cameras flashed, and nods of approval passed through the crowd like a currency of validation. Clémence continued, her voice confident and smooth. 3 years of work, tireless research, deep emotional commitment to restoring these forgotten women. No one noticed the woman at the back of the room. Amélie stood in silence, just beyond the reach of the spotlight. Her face betrayed nothing. Her hands remained calm at her sides. Henri stood next to her, arms folded, gaze locked on the screen. "I'll let you speak," he whispered, "but not by asking for credit. You won't have to say a word. They'll ask for forgiveness first, on stage." Clémence was already soaking in praise. Journalists snapped photos, donors nodded. Then the screen behind her flickered. What should have been a looping highlight reel of Clémence's public interviews was suddenly interrupted. A line of text began to scroll across the screen, elegant and slow, every letter glowing, as if engraved based on original research by Amélie Laurent, 2019 to 2022. At first, no one moved. Then the room changed, Whisper's eyes darting, and Clémence froze, glass in hand, smile still on her lips, but her skin visibly paling. The room hadn't turned silent. It had turned alert. For a moment, no one spoke. The LED screen behind the stage, once a backdrop for accolades, now displayed a name most had never heard. And yet the air changed the moment they read it. Amélie Laurent. A woman in the back turned to her friend. "Who is she?" a journalist from Le Monde, lowered her camera. Wait, didn't she get escorted out earlier? Another guest leaned in, whispering sharply, "She's here." Now every eye began to scan the ballroom. Not for the curator, but for the name. Clémence d'Artois blinked rapidly on stage, frozen mid-speech. Her smile faltered, and for the first time that evening, she seemed unsure of where to place her hands. From the shadows, Amélie stood quietly. She hadn't stepped forward, she didn't wave, but somehow the crowd found her. One by one, heads turned, conversations paused, phones lowered, and then the ripple became a wave. The woman in the linen dress, the one they had called a server, the one they had pitied and mocked. She stood still, at the edge of the light, wearing the same flats, the same calm. She did not move, but the room did. Behind her, Henri said nothing. He didn't need to. Clémence stepped away from the podium, her hands visibly shaking. "This must be a mistake," she mumbled, then louder. "That credit line was never approved. Who authorized this?" A museum technician stepped forward from the control booth. It came directly from Fondation Laurent. Silence cracked like glass. Another curator whispered now, visibly pale, "Fondation Laurent. They're here tonight." The answer was walking slowly through the center of the room. Amélie didn't walk as someone seeking attention. She walked like someone retrieving what was always hers, and this time, no one stopped her. By the time Amélie reached the foot of the stage, the room had lost all pretense of poise. No one dared approach her, but everyone watched. The same people who had dismissed her at the entrance now clutched their glasses tightly, as if etiquette could shield them from the truth. Clémence stepped back, one hand still holding the mic, the other trembling at her side. "Madame Laurent, I wasn't told you would be attending tonight." Amélie looked at her calm, steady, unimpressed. "I wasn't told I'd be escorted out." A low murmur spread. The curator from earlier, Madame Ricard, went pale. "Your Fondation Laurent." "I am." Henri stepped forward, then voice clear, slicing through the tension like a violin string pulled taut. "She's not only the director of Fondation Laurent," he announced. "She is the reason this exhibition exists. She's the woman who unearthed every artifact, translated every letter, and wrote every line you see in this museum." He turned to face the audience. "And tonight, you left her outside." Gasps, whispers, and a few heads dropped in shame. Others looked at Amélie with dawning horror. A journalist fumbled with her phone. "This is going live." "Oh my God!" They threw out the founder of their main sponsor. One of the museum's board members leaned toward his assistant. "If this hits the press, we're finished." But the press was already watching. Upon the back wall of the ballroom, the projected text changed again. In bold, white letters, "Fondation, Laurent, curated by a Laurent, in honor of truth." And underneath it, a single quote appeared, "Let the forgotten step into the light." Clémence stared at it, then at Amélie, her voice cracking. I didn't know. You looked like someone who didn't belong," Amélie finished gently, "or someone you didn't bother to ask about." Another silence. Then Amélie spoke, her voice low, clear, and final. "You looked at my dress, but you never looked at the name on the wall." Clémence opened her mouth again, but nothing came out, not even an apology. What could she say? That she didn't recognize the woman whose work she had stolen, that she thought the curator of the year would never wear linen. Behind Amélie, the glass facade of the museum lit up with one final display. A new name had been etched across the skyline of Paris. Amélie Laurent, lumière silencieuse, the silent light. No spotlight shone on her. It didn't need to. The room was lit by the glow of shame. Madame Ricard, still standing beside the board of directors, took a shaky step forward. There must be some mistake. We thought. Amélie turned to face her. You thought I was small enough to ignore, she said quietly, but you forgot one thing. I didn't come here to be recognized. I came to recognize each of you, one by one. The people who had whispered, mocked, and sneered tried to retreat into the crowd, but the cameras were faster. Within seconds, live streams had begun circulating online. They laughed her out of the building. 20 minutes later, they were clapping for her like royalty. Near silent light, Gala exposed, Laurent returns. A young curator who had once rolled her eyes at Amélie now stood frozen as a reporter shoved a microphone in her face. Did you know who she was? I didn't look, the curator mumbled. We were told she was no one. The board chairman took the podium, then his voice cracking. Mesdames et messieurs, we would like to formally acknowledge a grave mistake. The woman you see before you has not only supported this exhibition, but over 40 global projects in the past decade. He looked at Amélie as if seeing her for the first time. She has never asked for applause. Tonight, we offer it not for the title, but for the truth. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It was slow, uneven, hesitant. Not because they didn't admire her, but because they finally understood the cost of having ignored her. And in the front row, a young assistant, one of the few who had offered her a glance of kindness earlier, stood quietly clapping with both hands and tears in her eyes. Amélie bowed her head gently in return. She hadn't shouted, she hadn't demanded, but somehow the room was now listening only to her. Outside the Musée d'Orsay, the Paris night had quieted, but inside the Gala was still stunned into stillness. No one laughed now, no one postured, no one checked their phone. They simply watched. Amélie stood in the same cream linen dress, same flats, same soft bun. But somehow, she now looked 10 feet tall. She hadn't taken the mic, she hadn't given a speech, she had given them something more lasting. A mirror so clear, they couldn't look away from their own reflection in it. The chairman tried to offer her the podium. Would you like to say a few words? She shook her head gently. The building has already spoken for me. She turned slowly, facing the sea of faces. Some flushed with embarrassment, others softened by quiet awe. And then she walked away. No spotlight followed, no orchestra played. But the silence she left behind was louder than any applause. As she neared the exit, a small voice called out. It was the young assistant from earlier, the one who had seen the foundation. Laurent's seal on the envelope. She rushed forward, her voice trembling. Thank you for not leaving when they told you to. Amélie smiled, a soft, understanding smile that said more than 1,000 lectures ever could. A photographer caught the moment. Amélie bending down to tie the loose shoelace of the assistant, her head bowed in humility, her presence glowing with quiet grace. By sunrise, that image would be on every French newspaper's front page. The woman they threw out of the gala saved its honor. And beneath the headline, just one sentence quoted from an anonymous attendee. She didn't strike back with power. She answered with dignity, and for that, she stood taller than them all, because sometimes the loudest voice in the room belongs to the one who never raised it. And sometimes the person the world overlooks is the very one who was holding the world together all along. Sometimes the world won't recognize your worth until it no longer has the power to ignore you. Amélie Laurent didn't arrive with a press team or a gown that turned heads. She arrived with quiet eyes, a worn folder, and the kind of dignity that can't be purchased or praised into existence. They mistook her for invisible because she didn't demand to be seen. They laughed because they thought silence meant powerlessness. But they were wrong, because Amelie didn't fight for attention. She waited for the moment. The truth could speak louder than applause, and when it did, no one dared interrupt. That night, Paris learned something it had forgotten, that true power isn't how many people stand behind you. It's whether you can stand alone and not waver. She didn't raise her voice, she raised a mirror, and in that reflection, those who once ridiculed her were forced to see themselves clearly for the very first time. Her name didn't echo through the hall because it was famous. It echoed because it stood for something, because it reminded people that kindness doesn't mean weakness and elegance has nothing to do with wealth. While they scrambled for recognition, she walked with resolve. While they posted photos for attention, she held history in her hands. While they clung to titles, she rewrote the meaning of legacy. Amelie didn't want revenge. She wanted restoration. She didn't want to prove she belonged. She wanted to prove that belonging doesn't come from how you look, but from what you build, even when no one is looking. That night, the woman they pushed out of the room walked back in, not to be crowned, but to remind them who unlocked the door in the first place. And in that moment, silence became her language of justice. Grace became her answer to cruelty, and presence, steady, unapologetic, and quiet, became more powerful than any spotlight. So if you've ever been told you're too quiet, too soft, too plain to matter, if you've ever been overlooked in a room that didn't think you deserved a seat, remember her. Remember that you don't have to wear power to hold it. You don't have to shout to shake the room. And you don't need permission to be the reason the lights turn on. Because sometimes the most unforgettable name in the room is the one no one noticed until it lit up the whole building. If this story spoke to you, if you've ever felt underestimated, excluded, or silenced, know this: your voice doesn't need volume, it needs truth. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And follow Toch Story for more journeys where those cast aside become the reason the world must finally look up.